You're listening to The Dan Nicholl Show.
The Dan Nicholl Show this week is on location, not in one of our usual studios, but instead in one of the great homes of luxury in South Africa, dare I say in the world. And not just a home of luxury, it is a home of art, it is a home of fine wine, it is a home of great food, and it's a home of a rather good-looking man who never seems to get any older, who enjoys all of the above and a healthy dash of sport as well. He is not just one of the great modern South Africans, he's a great friend of mine. He's someone I've played a bit of golf with, spent a great deal of time with, and who I'm very excited to have on the show. Mr. Paul Harris, welcome.
Oh, there, Dan.
I often wonder, as somebody who gets to call Ellerman House home, how or why you would ever leave this place because it's so beautiful. And then I think of the many things we have in common, and there are a fair few. There is a sense of adventure and the sense of loving to see the world and have experiences and discover new things. And I think as majestic as Ellerman House is, you are someone who does like all of these great experiences and seeing so much beyond the horizon.
Yeah, I suppose I've never thought of it like that. It's something that evolved. I never really planned to have Ellerman House as it is now, and it was a bit of a passion project. I've enjoyed every minute of it. Our family has, and basically we've just built on and collected and so on. And the main thing about it is sharing it with people.
Oh, I'm very lucky in that you've shared it with me on many occasions.
Look, it's yeah, and we certainly don't live here. We'd never do that. And if I come to Cape Town and there happens to be a room available, then I'll book it. And I always say that when I'm here, I'm a guest. I'm not involved in the management.
Well, I know a couple of people here, so if you ever do need a room, give me a shout. I'll see what I can do. It captures so much of the Paul I know, and that you're so passionate about art, and this is a living art gallery, so passionate about wine, and it's one of the great wine cellars and wine collections. And I was thinking, well, it's not really a sport angle. And then I remember that the TV in the wine bar frequently has cricket on it, which is another one of your great passions. And all of those are the indulgences that we've spent a lot of time sharing. And I do want to touch on those. But I'd like to start by going back a bit and Paul Harris, the banker, which is, I think, how you first came to prominence in the public space. When you were pre-banking days, when you were end of school, through university, was there a vision at that stage of who Paul Harris might become, what you might like to do one day?
Definitely not. Definitely not. In fact, when I graduated at Stellenbosch, and I had two job offers. One was in the HR division of Ford Motor Company in PE, and it was and a job offer to articles in Joburg. And for a matter of sort of 50, 60 Rand, I took Joburg.
That was a lot of money in those days.
Yeah, and that's how I got into finance, really. Yeah.
So that set you on a path to what now seems like what was always destined to create one of the great banks of the world and have this incredible story of the growth of South Africa. It would have been very different though at that stage, a group of still fairly young people finding their feet, deciding what to do. What was the nucleus of coming together and deciding that this is what you wanted to do and end up actually starting one of the great banking success stories?
Yeah, again, nothing was really planned. There were opportunities that presented themselves, and we took the opportunities. And we worked damn hard. We had one particular angle in project finance in those days that enabled us as a very small company to really finance very big projects because we used other people's money,
which is always useful.
Exactly, and we had the techniques of how to do that, and I must say we really went into it, and I think we became pretty expert at it, and that's how we started as project financiers, and then as that business evolved and was successful, we then branched into various other parts of finance, And then one day we had the opportunity of merging with Rand Merchant Bank. And the company that we had at that time merged with Rand Merchant Bank, and we carried on under the name Rand Merchant Bank, which you have today.
At what point did you start to realize that, hang on, this has actually become something quite large and possibly even mildly terrifying?
Yeah, look, we were always we always had a small company mentality, and I think that was largely one of the reasons that we were successful. Is that we never had a big bureaucracy. We were always a small company, and we had a small company mentality and culture, and we really believed in that, and we still do. We think that that's the greatest asset of any company. It's its corporate culture. And so we manage that in the same way one would manage your physical assets, your buildings and your and so on. So the corporate culture and then the people. Our people come first. In fact, over many years, I've eventually come to the conclusion that the order is not customers first, it's your people first. And your people first, then your customers, then your shareholders. And if you have that formula, I think that you can build a successful company almost in anything.
Well, Ellerman House as an example, that would clearly be one that works. And it clearly did work for you guys. And it's been a massive success story. But there are moments when it's not a great success story and things are not that easy. We have a lot of sports guests on the show. And for me, the times when they've made 3 ducks in a row or they've been dropped from the Springboks or when life is not good is when you get the most lessons, but also the most fascinating moments. Were there some moments like that, particularly in the earlier days when you wondered what on earth you'd got yourself into and how on earth you might get out of it?
Yeah, I mean, to start with, you don't know how to put food on the table the next day. I mean, things were tough in the early days, and there were risks that we had to take, and always calculated risks. And not everything comes off. And if you take the philosophy that half the things you try don't come off, then the only way to overcome that is you must try more things. Well, then half of them will come off. But if you put all your eggs in one basket, it can be quite tough.
What was the scariest of them all? What was the darkest moment?
It's maybe not in the very early days, but the darkest moment was definitely the financial crisis in 07, 08. And I always remember one day we woke up and First Rand was worth more than Citibank and Morgan Stanley put together. And that was not a reflection on how valuable First Rand was. It was just what had happened in the market that and we just said, how can it, how can we possibly survive if that is if those are the what's happening in the market? So those were the scariest days, without a doubt. I mean, it was like a TV show. You'd go on to see how much the shares had fallen, and there's almost a collapse of the total economy in the world, really. That was scary. Those were my scariest days.
But you did get through them and you came out the other side. And a big part of you being able to do that personally is that of all of my friends, there are a few who have a more grounded sense of optimism than you do. And many people will know this without possibly remembering it immediately. There is the famous Paul Harris letter to you. I think mythical friend in Australia. I'm not sure if this friend really existed or not. Where your friend had said, "I've read all this terrible stuff about South Africa. It's burning to the ground and it's full of crime and it's a terrible place. And why are you not leaving immediately?" And you wrote a wonderfully balanced, wonderfully uplifting, beautifully spoken piece about why South Africa did still have so much to offer. And it's a piece that still pops up on social media from time to time. And I think some people have actually forgotten who actually authored it. It's just this guy called Paul. But that not only for me said so much about it, it was wonderful about this country of ours, but also said a lot about who Paul Harris is.
Yeah, that letter was a genuine letter that I wrote to a friend of mine, and one of the young guys asked me what I thought of The Future of South Africa, and I copied it to him, and one thing led to another, and it went viral. And then it pops up every now and then, and with a very, very predictable response. Some people sort of say, great, and other people say, how can you possibly say that South Africa is okay? I mean, come on, And, that I don't think is the message. I think the message is, if you're living here, there is absolutely no sense in my mind of spending energy on being negative. You're here, you have to make the best of it. And to go out and sort of continually talk about all the problems and do you know how bad it is here? I mean, I cannot see that in any way can be good for anybody. Definitely not good for your psyche. There are a lot of people that have got no option but to stay here. Most people stay here because they choose to stay here and they love this place, and I'm in that category for certain. And therefore, we have to be positive. We must look at the positive things, accept that these things aren't right. Of course they're not. There are lots of problems in this country. But if you've got X amount of energy, spend it on positive things rather than self-flagellation.
It's a wonderful philosophy. It's one that's sometimes a little easier to speak about than to carry out. We all have those moments where yet another headline or episode of Carte Blanche has us scratching our heads in dismay. But I agree entirely. There is so much to be positive about, especially when it relates to some of our areas of shared passion. So let's look at a couple of those. And I start with what probably occupies most of the conversations we've ever had on golf courses or at bars in Scotland at 3 a.m. or wherever else we occasionally hang out. And that would be sport. You were, by all accounts, a fairly accomplished sportsman in your youth, which is only recently departed. And it is a space where I think so many of the smiles I've seen you have come via conversations about cricket or rugby or golf or other sporting success stories, of which South Africa is able to lay claim to an abnormal number.
Yeah, I must say I'm very passionate about sport, golf, rugby, cricket. Those are my sports, although I sort of follow others too. And I've been, I think, a very loyal supporter of South African rugby and cricket in terms of I've watched a lot of sport. And ultimately, the Proteas cricket paid me back at Lord's, which was one of the great events that I've seen. I mean, I actually watched some of the run-outs at Edgbaston, and I watched that 6 hit by young Elliott in New Zealand. So I've had some real downers with the Proteas. But that test at Lord's recently was a bit of a highlight of all the things I've seen, I must say.
As good as it gets.
Yeah.
And you've seen Rugby World Cup finals, and I think that probably just gives away that if there is a pecking order, it is cricket that sits at the top.
Probably, yeah.
So it is a great passion of yours, and it's something that South Africans can take a huge amount of joy from and pride from. Another one we can, but perhaps don't celebrate as much, is the quality of art that comes out of South Africa. And we're, as I mentioned, at Ellerman House, which is in itself, I think, mistakenly called a hotel. It really is an art gallery that people can stay at. And the collection is extraordinary. I think you're one painting away from putting them on the ceilings. There's so much wonderful art here. And the variety, the difference between the artists, their backgrounds, the subject matter, the technique they approach. There is such a staggering tribute to South African art just in this building, which suggests how much else there is out there.
Yeah, I often say that South Africa, in many respects, is a re-emerging country, but it's often seen as an emerging country. And I think that applies to our wine, for example. I mean, South Africa provided Australia with the first cuttings of their wineries in 1788. So our wine industry goes back to 16...
Were you involved in that?
My grandfather was. So we are a re-emerging country, and we've got some incredible history in terms of art and wine. And what I try and do here is share the good parts of South Africa and the good things that we are capable of doing, and in that way showcase what we're capable of. And therefore, with our art collection, we started off just collecting art that we liked to put on the walls to decorate the place. But after a while, we recognized that we had a pretty good collection of South African art, and so we then said, right, only South African art, yeah, and let's try and get a body of work that somebody can walk in here and get a good view of the full depths of South African art from a historical point of view, different genres, different types, different styles, different artists, and so on. So that's what we try to do with our art collection, is to give people an overview really of South African art, right down to the very contemporary stuff, starting from 1820s and so on. So that has been in the art. And in the wine, we effectively did the same. We've got the terroir wall there, which is 100 top wineries where we took soil samples of some of their best vineyards, and we put it in blocks on the wall. And I think if you look at that, you get the incredible diversity of South African wine. All those blocks, the minerality of the soil and so on is so different. So there's no such thing as a South African wine. There's just lots of small boutique type of wineries, and some of which make fantastic wine. But maybe because of that, and they're smaller and so on, they haven't got the resources to market themselves in where some of the other wineries do around the world. So I think they're very underappreciated. I think South African art is also very underappreciated, also because we're seen as an emerging art thing and not a re-emerging situation. I mean, we had a terrible time with apartheid. Apartheid just set us back in every single way. And we're coming out of that, and we've got incredible talent and so many things. You've mentioned sport, wine, and art, and so
That fiercely patriotic streak of yours, which comes across quietly but with huge determination, shown in the almost exclusively South African wine collection here. There are a few bottles of champagne and the odd Sauterne in a corner somewhere, but by and large it's pure South African art as well. Gives people who come from around the world, who might have names like Oprah or Rafa or Kardashian. We're not mentioning anyone in particular, just some random examples, but they get to see the very best of South Africa when they come here. When they walk through and they have a look at the art, I've seen so much of it through here, and also the Art Angels auction, which I've been lucky enough to play a role in occasionally, and all these young names coming through, some of them more established. Who for you are a couple of South African artists who, for me as an aspiring art collector, I should be looking out for?
Well, I almost would prefer not to say that, because there's so many good ones.
Ever the diplomat, Paul Harris.
No, I'm not. Each person, one of the great things about having a diverse taste is that there's room for everybody, and everybody, no one person can value the same wine, value the same art. That's great. I mean, isn't that good? So
let me ask you a different question.
Be different to your favorites,
as they should be. We're all different people. I'll reframe it then. I was catching up with your young sommelier Joe a little earlier. A fantastic new addition to the team, and I asked him a similar question, but it was, if for some terrible reason the cellar was to catch fire and you could only grab one bottle to run out with, what would it be? And it's not necessarily the best bottle you choose, but there's often one that's got some sort of emotional attachment. So if something similar, God forbid, were to happen here, is there one particular painting that you tuck under your arm and bolt down the road with?
I think I would probably take one of the Alexis Preller pieces.
I think that's a shrewd call.
In fact, it's the one that is on the front page of our book on our art collection.
That is a fabulous piece.
But there's something else I think I should just add. You say art, wine, so on. Also the garden. And that is quite an interesting story in that we said we only want indigenous plants here. So we took out all the non-indigenous. We believe that roses belong in the mud island. They're not necessarily South African. So we've got pincushions and fynbos and that type of thing. We've got one or two non-indigenous trees, but they've been around for a long time. And then probably the most important of all that is echte Suid-Afrikaanse gasvryheid. And that is just the hospitality and I always say that there are more smiles of people in South Africa than any other country in the world, and that is what it is. It's a happy thing. You can I always say you can take your job seriously, but you can't take yourself seriously, and we don't take ourselves seriously. We gewone mense.
You preempted me circling back to exactly that, and that I think that the strength of the Ellerman House experience is driven by people, and the strength of so much that's good about South Africa comes from its people. And if you look at what we have been through for so many years at so many different levels, we've often survived, persevered, triumphed despite and not because of what we've been through. And it has created, someone who's traveled the world, you'll have a perspective on that, just a quite remarkable people in this country of ours.
Absolutely. I think that we've had to put up with so much. We're putting up with so much. I mean, if you think of it, we've perpetual underperformers. We've never really reached our potential. And we shoot own goals the whole time. Just pick up any newspaper and count the own goals that our government has done. I mean, it's ridiculous. But and we live through it. I mean, we have to accept it, and we don't have to accept it, but we just have to see that as part of the territory. It's where we are. It's a lot of it is where we are historically. There are a lot of things that we have to come to grips with still, and that we have to deal with, and some of the pains of the past. It's not all finished. It's not. It's a process. And yeah. So.
There are many things I envy about you, Paul, your wine collection being one of them, your golf swing being another.
Yeah, I like that.
But the third one would be the fact that you've decided clearly at some point relatively early on in life not to get any older at all, both on the outside and on the inside. And there is this wonderful youthfulness to you that I find so great. And it means that you're somebody who just keeps going and keeps traveling the world and watching sport and having fun, but also you're still working, and you could have your feet up in slippers playing with your grandchildren and pottering about in a garden, but instead there is so much you're still doing. There's the rain business that has taken off and has done ridiculously well with your former PA doing a strong job alongside. There's still a huge amount of drive to Paul Harris.
Yeah. I don't think it's drive to. It's not as if there's a destination, but if something intrigues one, I get very intrigued and involved, and switching really my main interest from banking to telco in rain was incredible and a fantastic learning curve. I knew absolutely zero about it, and I think I can sort of hold a general conversation about it, and that's been great. And I think often my philosophy is that if I see somebody is passionate about something, something really floats their boat, I'm sort of envious of it. And I say, come on, if you're so excited about that, I also want to be excited about it. So, I mean, I've got a great friend, Rudolf House, who loves classical music. And he almost gets in a trance. He enjoys it so much. And I said, I'd love to also be like that. So teach me about it. And we spent a long time him teaching me about it. I still haven't quite. I don't think I get as much pleasure out of it as he does. But it's the same with Afrikaans music. Yes, I really enjoy Afrikaans music. And Jean Engelbrecht has an annual concert at Tussen Vrede called Versnit. And I'm now the honorary Soti there. I go there and I genuinely really love the Afrikaans music. I think it's so diverse and it's so unique as well.
It speaks to someone who has myriad interests and somebody who's genuinely curious. And I think curiosity is such a wonderful attribute to have. And if you lose your curiosity, I think you've lost such a big part of why we're here. And I can't see you ever losing that curiosity. You've also not lost your passion, and I don't think you've lost your belief and optimism. But I will ask you as we wrap up and head downstairs to find 7 or 8 good bottles of wine, if said friend in Australia, who's a little older now, were to send back a similar letter and you were to respond today, would the tone, if not the exact detail, still be much the same as it was with the original?
Look, I would perhaps be realistic in saying things haven't really changed. We're still underperforming, and all the negatives are still there. Some of them are worse than what they were. But I think I'd also I'd say that we're still having a good time. We're still okay. And it's not. A lot of people say you can say that, and Dan can say it, and I can say that, but that applies to most people in South Africa. They're really happy. You walk around, people smile and they're happy, and they actually. Unfortunately, some people are very disadvantaged, but they just find a way to get by, and they're good, and they've got families, and they're leaders in their communities, and that type of thing. And if people haven't got anything, if you go to a place like India, well, maybe not anymore, but if you really want to see poverty, you could go to those places. But South Africa, people just find a way to survive and to make good. And I just think that people that have got means should do what they can to help other people.
And I suppose your postscript could be a reminder to said friend that he has sent an email to somebody living in the country with a 4-time Rugby World Championship winning side, the World Test Cricket champions, myriad great golfers, incredible athletes, fabulous wine, and beautiful sunshine.
Yeah, and Chelsea Flower Show.
Dear. Without playing down, because I think we're both aware there are so many challenges in South Africa across so many levels, but there are still so many reasons to smile every day, and we both get to travel far more than most, possibly a little too much sometimes, but it does give you that reminder when you get back to South Africa that no matter how nice other parts of the world may be, there is just something about this country and about the people in this country that blows the rest of the world away.
Ellerman House, 95% of our guests are foreigners. And I haven't come across one that's been here for the first time that hasn't been blown away by it. Because it's always different to what they expect. Not always better, but different and intriguing and interesting.
And that, I think, cuts to the core of just why we love calling this place home. Paul Harris, thank you. It's been great having you on the show. Thank you for many years of friendship, many great rounds of golf, loads of great glasses of wine. We have managed to get through our conversation without bringing in an encounter in a Scottish bar with the 2 young ladies that now resulted in me calling you Grandad most times I see you. But we'll have to leave that as a very good reason to have you back on the show as soon as we can.
Thanks so much, Dan. Been a pleasure.
So there we go. The man, he started one of the great South African banks. He now runs one of the great South African telcos, and he's the man behind one of the world's finest luxury boutique hotels. But if you want a real definition, very simply, my special guest on the show this week is Paul Harris, a great and very happy South African.
You're listening to The Dan Nicholl Show.